Let's say you just picked up, are looking to pick up an Atari ST. One of the first things you want to do is to boot it up and see if it's working. To do this, you're going to need some way of getting video output. In today's video, I'm going to go over ways to get video output from an Atari ST. Let's go. This year at VCF Midwest, I talked to a lot of folks that watch this channel and a lot of folks that don't, who are just simply interested in the Atari ST. And I heard from more than just a few of the folks that I ran into, that they'd like to see some videos on how to get started with the Atari ST. So today's video is the first in a series I'm referring to as Atari ST 101. This overview doesn't cover the Atari TT or Falcon computers, as their video outputs are quite a bit different than the rest of the Atari ST computers. But video output is essential for any computer. But if you don't have an original monitor, especially like one of these for your Atari ST, it may seem a bit daunting to figure out, well, so how am I supposed to get video out? Lucky for all of us, even if it does seem daunting, the Atari ST is actually quite a bit easier than we may think. Thanks in part to the Atari ST's video output signal, how it works, but also partly to the Atari ST community as a whole, and the broader retro community as well. Okay, before we get into how we get the video out, I want to start by going over the 3 different video output modes, because this has a little bit to do with how we're going to get the video out of the computer. First, we have the color output modes: low resolution at 320 by 200 pixels. With 16 colors, maximum colors on screen at any given time, out of a palette of 512 colors. That's for the Atari ST. For the Atari STE, that palette bumps up to over 4,000. Now, you can use some trickery to get more colors on screen at any given point in time, but we're just keeping it simple, at least to begin with. The medium resolution bumps up that resolution, the 320, up to 640, basically doubles it, by 200 pixels. It doesn't change that, so what you see when you look at the screen, it looks squished, stretched, however you want to refer to it, as compared to ST low. ST medium also has 4 maximum colors on screen out of that same palette that you had before, either 512 or over 4,000. These modes provide a 15 kilohertz signal, which is used by a color monitor, the Atari ST color monitor, or Atari ST compatible color monitor, CRT, or LCD screens that can potentially work as well. Using a monochrome display like this, the Atari ST can output its high resolution mode with 640 by 400 pixels and 2 colors, obviously, black and white. Now that low resolution, 300 by 200 pixels with 16 colors on screen, was the most common video mode used for games, while medium was the color productivity mode that was also used in some games. High resolution monochrome mode was mostly used for productivity, but some games did support it, and it was a very crisp high resolution in 1985 mode. Now, changing color resolution mode is as simple as selecting the drop down up here under options, selecting set preferences, and simply clicking on the new resolution. The computer then resets, and you now have, in this case, switched from low to medium resolution. Now, what you'll also see under the options, you also see the high resolution mode, but it's grayed out because it's not available with this type of signal. You need to change the signal on the port itself. There actually needs to be a monochrome select signal. There's a pin that needs to be set to ground. And by doing that, it then enables the high resolution mode and disables any of the color resolution modes. Looking at the video outputs, all Atari STs have a monitor output. Excluding the TT and excluding the Falcon, all other Atari STs have a 13 DIN port monitor connection. That the RGB signal, the audio, that mono signal output, all input output, all come out of. Right. However, a number of Atari STs also include an RF modulator output. It says television here. This is an RF modulator output. Those are typically denoted by an M in the title of the machine. 520 STM, 520 STFM. The M refers to modulator. In this case, this is an Atari ST. You can tell by the audio ports here, but it also has a modulator on it as well. The RF port outputs an RF signal that can be used with a television. The Atari STs that have this feature, they output a color signal, the color and the audio signal over this port. The Atari STs that I have that have RF modulators, I have 3 in total. This is the best video signal I can get out on my screen that can take an RF signal into it. Now, this isn't the best signal, but it works in a pinch if you have to have it. This is a computer that doesn't have a floppy drive, but luckily it at least has an RF modulator output. The others have much worse video output from this method. All right, so you can do medium and low resolution, not high resolution. Get you an idea as to what RF modulator output looks like. It works in a pinch. It can help. I'm sure there are ways you could possibly make it better, but in my case, I really never use it. Now, the method you've seen me use in my other videos that I like to use to get video output from my Atari STs maps the Atari 13-pin DIN connector, which you see here, to a VGA port. This takes the RGB signals and the different sync signals, in addition to that, also the audio output, and maps it to this audio jack, but then also the VGA port here. This signal can be used by many, many different Atari, or not Atari, modern monitors in monochrome mode. The monochrome signal from an Atari ST is around a 35 kilohertz horizontal sync, and that's really what drives these monitors. A typical VGA monitor can pick up that signal just fine. The color, on the other hand, if we were to flip this switch to color, this switch here simply sets the mono detect signal to ground in mono mode and free in color mode. All right, so that causes the Atari ST to output different video signals. In color mode, the Atari ST outputs a 15 kilohertz horizontal sync signal. That is usable on multi-sync CRT monitors, Atari ST monitors, and many, not a lot, not every modern LCD monitor, but enough that you can actually find them available. The Dell monitor that you'll see me use regularly on my channel is one that I bought simply a year ago, brand new from Dell. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to plug this in, show this with this bog standard monitor, first in monochrome mode, showing that it works in monochrome mode, and then I want to show you what this looks like if I try to output the color signal to it. Now, I haven't adjusted the different monitor settings to get the picture perfectly on the screen, but as you can see, this works, and this is a very simple way to test that your Atari ST's monitor video output works. It's in monochrome mode. It isn't the most useful for playing games, but for productivity, it's fine. There's a whole ton of jailbarring on here, but still, this is one way that you can get an Atari ST to work with virtually any modern monitor that has a VGA port on it. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to power off the ST. We're going to flip that switch to color mode. Okay, so now we are going to power on the Atari ST with the color mode switched on to show what it looks like on an unsupported monitor. You might get that kind of signal, and sometimes you also may get an out of range signal or a message that says out of range, but it's picking something up. It isn't actually displaying, so the color mode only works on monitors that are capable of 15 kilohertz signal. Now, this is an Atari ST hooked up through that same adapter to a 15 kilohertz capable monitor. This is the modern, I bought it brand new a year ago, Dell monitor. I'll put this specific monitor model number in the notes below, the description below, as well as another site. It's a 15 kilohertz wiki, whatever you want to call it, kind of a site that goes over and lists out a series of many different 15 kilohertz capable modern LCD monitors that you can use with either an Atari ST or an Amiga computer. Now, in addition to outputting directly to a 15 kilohertz monitor, you can also output to something like an OSSC, an upscaler. And you simply connect, oh, let me zoom out here, to one of these OSSCs through the VGA input. Now, not all upscalers are created equal. You might find some on Amazon that are a VGA to HDMI upscaler. In most instances, they do not support the 15 kilohertz signal that an Atari ST generates. So I wouldn't just buy some, I mean, if you're welcome to buy some random ones and experiment and see which ones work, because there are some that will work, but not all of them will. The OSSC here, however, does work. And what we're going to do now is we're going to plug in to the VGA port, use the HDMI out, and get the signal for this screen through the HDMI port. And this allows you to use it with any modern HDMI compatible screen, almost any. I'm sure there are some that don't work just so, but the vast majority will work with an OSSC upscaler. Let me get it connected and we'll boot it up. So now we're taking this OSSC, connected it to power, connected it to the VGA cable here. We'll connect the other end, as if I can get it to not bang around, up to the ST to VGA connector. Plug it on in. I also plug the audio port out to there because I'll just get the audio directly from the Atari ST rather than trying to pass it through the OSSC. Then I take the HDMI connector, connect that. We're going to flip the switch on the OSSC. And I have this handy dandy controller. We're getting a signal now from the OSSC. What I'm going to do is power on the Atari ST, use the remote to change the mode on the OSSC to RGB, and get it to sync up. And here we are. This green screen is a special screen for my Atari STE that has the STE536 accelerator card in it. There's nothing special about the video output of it. It's just a simple accelerator card. Boot into XBoot. And voila, we have the desktop. Through HDMI now, rather than through directly to the VGA port. We go VGA port to upscaler to HDMI. Now there's a lot of settings you can adjust on the OSSC to improve the signal to make it look even prettier. I've not done that. I haven't optimized with this monitor or the OSSC because I use the OSSC with my Atari Falcon generally. Now, on to the next video output. A very common way to connect an Atari ST RGB signal to your TV or to your monitor port in Europe is using a SCART connector. So this takes the DIN signals, again, the Atari ST video output signals, RGB signals, and converts it to a SCART video mode. Now, this uses the composite sync along with the RGB signals in order to provide that video output signal. And honestly, this is one of the best ones that's around. And one of the easiest ones to get into without, you don't necessarily need an OSSC. In my case, I don't have any TVs or monitors that accept SCART. In general, they didn't have a whole lot of them in the United States. In Europe, they're relatively frequent, relatively common. So this is a fantastic way in Europe in order to get that signal output. And even in the US, you get one of these cables and adapters. You don't necessarily have to connect it to a SCART screen, but you can find many upscalers. Again, the OSSC is one of those kinds of upscalers. While VGA to HDMI upscalers are more problematic because they're expecting a standard VGA signal, SCART to HDMI upscalers are expecting a standard SCART signal, which the Atari ST in general will output. I'll get into the nuances of it in just a minute. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the OSSC, the one upscaler that I have, plug in the SCART connector here. We're going to plug in the port to the Atari ST, power, HDMI. And now we're going to power up the screen, get the signal from the OSSC to begin with. And now we're going to power it on. There we go. Needed a specific profile loaded in order to get it to work properly. Beautiful. Now, this is actually a really good signal. It's as good, if not better, than the VGA signal that you saw there previously. It's also relatively simple to get up to speed. As you can see, it works with the color modes. It will not work with high resolution. Here we can show you set the preferences. We can go to low, and we'll get a nice signal on low, but we're not going to want to get the high. We're not going to be able to get the high signal. Now, I love SCART. I would recommend it to almost anyone in the US globally to use as our Atari ST to SCART kind of with an HDMI upscaler. It's simple, it's easy, and it generally just works. There is one major downside, and I do say it is major. It requires the composite sync signal that isn't present, or that is present with all Atari STs with a modulator. There is circuitry that can be added to many Atari STs that can simply add the composite signal, but many of the older Atari STs don't have that composite sync signal. And as such, like this original Atari 520 ST from 1985, it does not have it. And so with the SCART, you're not going to get a good video output, or you're not going to get any video output. In the case of those Atari STs that do not have an RF modulator output, like this one, a 1040 ST, what you have is you have an option to add the C-Sync to the video output signal. That requires, actually let's zoom in a little bit further here, onto the RF area. So this is where the RF signal is generated, typically where an RF modulator is plugged in. However, you see the silk screen here. These components here, this transistor, these resistors, and these two diodes are all that are needed in order to get that composite sync out of the Atari ST now. So, like I said, no, all hope is not lost. If you do not have the silk screen, there are some guides online to show you how to add it. We're going to zoom back out again, and we're going to plug in the SCART cable right over here, plug in power. Yes, and I have an external connector. I don't always use the open power supplies that everyone likes to tell me are dangerous, and I'm going to shock myself. I probably will one of these days. And everyone who has told me in the comments that I need to do that, they can tell me I told you so as many times as they'd like. But at least today, I'm using just an external plug with an external power brick. Well, pseudo power brick. Okay, so we have that done. We're going to zoom out a little further. Oops, now let's go. We're going to back out here. Now that we have, as you can see, we have the power brick over here. We are now powering on the OSSC. I'm going to power on the computer with this switch, and then we're going to get the input. All right, you're going to ask me, what in the world is this? There are some modified versions of TOS that are out there. This is a fantastic version. I absolutely love it. It has integrated hard disk driver, which is fantastic. However, that's not what this video is about. But as you can see, we now have that composite signal in an Atari ST without an RF modulator. To add that, again, was 3 resistors, 2 diodes, 1 transistor, maybe a total of $3 or $4, not including shipping from Mouser or DigiKey, I understand, and maybe 15 minutes of effort. Relatively simple, you get that out. Again, I can't say enough about this SCART video output. I use the VGA, ST to VGA, because I have screens that work with it. If you don't, and you want to use it with your favorite HDMI compatible screen, this is a fantastic way to go. The video quality is very similar to what you see with the ST to VGA. Okay, I'm going to save the best for last, or I saved the best for last rather, And this is one of the video output methods that I don't use personally myself and haven't. And I'll explain why a little bit later on. But this is the RGB to HDMI. And this is a simple board that connects with a Raspberry Pi Raspberry Pi Zero, W, whatever you want to call it. And that allows you to pull signals directly from your signal generation in your Atari ST. The Raspberry Pi then takes those signals and converts it to a beautiful, clean, crisp HDMI output. And this requires some basic simple soldering, some slight modification to your Atari ST, but it's probably one of the best real video outputs that you can get that connects with a modern monitor option, HDMI in that example here. There's a lot of options available to tweak the image to your liking. You can tweak it in any different way, or multiple ways, similar to the OSSC, but probably, from what I've seen, even more specific. Retro Hack Shack, that YouTube channel, YouTuber, he did a fantastic video with his Atari ST, or with an Atari ST, that he added RGB to HDMI on. He also sells them. There are many other people who sell adapter kits as well for the Atari ST in particular. Now, as I mentioned, of all the options of video output that I've talked about, this is one that I haven't used myself. And I really do have a reason why. If I was wanting the best video output for one Atari ST, I would immediately and gladly do it. I think, and I might still do it to be fully transparent here, and have that modification in glorious HDMI output. I actually have a 520 ST that, even with some various different modifications, when I plug it into a modern monitor, it still has pretty significant jail bars. So this is an RGB HDMI, might be in my future anyway. But the reason why I haven't done it to date yet is I have, as you've seen in some of my other videos potentially, a fleet of Atari ST computers. And rather than working on one and having that modification done to one, these Atari ST video output to VGA, SCART, OSSC, I only need one of those. Sometimes I have two, but generally I only need one of them. And I can then use it with any of my STs. Can I have them all running at the same time? No. And that's something that I ought to consider. At some point in the future, like I said, it's probably in my future for at least one of them to be modified in that way. Since this is an Atari ST 101 video, I've intentionally not focused on video quality differences. When looking at video quality, there are plenty of other considerations and opinions that are out there. Things like, you obviously have the different methods for connecting it, but there's also the internal circuitry that is in the various PCs, some better, some worse, some just older, some newer. And noise that comes from that circuitry itself, the computer itself. My objective here was to go over the different methods to just get video output and get you started initially. Personally, I believe that the cleanest output, the best output, is RGB to HDMI. There are some downsides to it, obviously, as I mentioned as well, but I'm totally fine with a lesser quality, with what I get from the ST to VGA. It's fine. You may want the best image possible, and I wish you the best in figuring out which one that is. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and if you have any other ideas or suggestions on this topic, or on any other Atari ST 101 topics you'd like to see, please comment down below. Like and subscribe if you're so inclined, and I appreciate you watching. Bye.